What would you do if you discovered that even the worst person you could imagine, someone who had committed every possible moral violation, could still find redemption? Today's story from the Shiva Purana might challenge everything you think you know about justice, mercy, and second chances. It's the tale of Devaraja, and fair warning, this isn't going to be comfortable to hear. But don't we all love a good redemption and transformation story? This story has been adapted for modern audiences, based on J.L. Shastri's English translation. As the sacred fire crackled in the forest clearing, Sage Saunaka leaned forward with curiosity burning in his eyes. The previous evening's discourse about the Shiva Purana's transformative power had left him with urgent questions. "O Sutta," Saunaka began, his voice filled with reverence, "you are truly blessed, and the most fortunate knower of the greatest truth. Out of your great compassion, you've shared this divine and wonderful teaching with us. This incredible narrative that destroys countless sins, purifies the mind, and pleases Lord Shiva. We've heard it with wonder. Thanks to your kindness, we now understand clearly that there is nothing as fine and transformative as this sacred story. But tell us," Saunaka's voice grew more intense, "who are those sinners in our current age? This difficult Kali Yuga, who can actually be saved by this story? Please enlighten us and bring satisfaction to the whole world." "My dear sage," Sutha replied with quiet intensity, "let me be absolutely clear about what this text claims to accomplish. We're talking about people who habitually commit terrible acts, those driven by greed, those who lie pathologically, those who abuse even their own parents, the violently arrogant, and those who completely abandon their social responsibilities." He paused, watching the sages' faces register surprise. This is a great spiritual practice, a jnana yajna, a sacrificial rite of wisdom. It yields both worldly happiness and ultimate liberation. It dispels all sins and brings joy to Shiva himself. Think of the worst kinds of people, those overwhelmed by greed, those who abandon truthfulness, those who disrespect even their own parents, arrogant and violent individuals. Even they become purified by this wisdom. Those who ignore their duties and responsibilities, people of malicious temperament, habitual deceivers, the ruthless and cruel, all are purified by this jnana yajna, even in our difficult age. Those who steal from religious institutions, people who commit adultery, those who are always engaged in harmful actions, rogues with wicked minds, even they are purified. People with unclean habits and disturbed minds, those who know no peace, embezzlers of temple funds, all find purification through this sacred wisdom. The spiritual benefit from this Purana destroys even the greatest sins, grants worldly enjoyment and salvation, and brings delight to Lord Shiva. Sutta paused, letting the promise sink in before continuing with a slight smile. "Now, let me share an ancient story that perfectly illustrates this point. Just hearing it removes all sins completely. In the city of Kiratas, there lived a Brahmin who was extremely poor and lacking in spiritual knowledge. His name was Devaraja, and frankly, he was about as far from the ideal Brahmin as you could imagine. Despite being born into a family expected to embody learning and virtue, Devaraja was utterly ignorant and desperately poor. Instead of pursuing knowledge or spiritual practice, he ran an alcohol business, selling various types of intoxicating beverages to anyone who would pay. He never performed the daily prayers that were fundamental to his tradition. He didn't bother with purification rituals. His lifestyle was more like that of a merchant, and not an honest one. He was perfectly comfortable betraying the trust of others. He lived like someone purely focused on selfish reasons, with no interest in higher values or spiritual development. But this was just the beginning of his moral descent. Sutta's voice grew more serious as he continued. Devaraja harbored no moral restraint in deceiving the unsuspecting. Through violence and elaborate schemes, he systematically robbed Brahmins, warriors, merchants, laborers, anyone who had something he wanted. Through these corrupt means, he accumulated considerable wealth. But here's what made him truly despicable. Not even the smallest portion of this stolen wealth was ever used for anything good. No charity, no support for those in need, no contribution to society. Nothing. His entire life was about taking from others and hoarding for himself. One day, while going to a lake for a bath, perhaps the only ritual he still observed, Devaraja saw a courtesan named Shobhavati. The moment he laid eyes on her, he was completely overwhelmed with desire. This beautiful woman was delighted to discover that a wealthy Brahmin had become infatuated with her. Through charming conversation, she easily captured his heart completely. He decided to make her his wife, and she agreed to the arrangement. Soon they were living together, eating together, drinking together, spending every moment in each other's company like any married couple. But this relationship would become the catalyst for even darker acts. Suta's voice grew heavy with the weight of the tragedy to come. Devaraja's mother, father, and legitimate wife repeatedly tried to reason with him about this destructive relationship. They pleaded with him to abandon this path that was destroying both his reputation and his soul. Then came the night that sealed his damnation. In a fit of rage, he murdered his mother, father, and legitimate wife while they slept, stealing all their wealth. Completely enslaved by his infatuation with the courtesan, he handed over to her not only his own wealth, but also everything he had looted from his murdered family members. Living with this woman, Devaraja abandoned every remaining trace of civilized behavior. He ate foods that were completely forbidden by his tradition, became heavily addicted to alcohol, and even ate from the same plate as his courtesan, a practice considered deeply polluting in his culture. Suta's voice dropped to almost a whisper. His transformation was complete. From a Brahmin supposed to represent wisdom and virtue, he had become someone who embodied the very worst of human nature: murder, theft, deception, addiction, the complete abandonment of family duty. There was literally no major moral violation he hadn't committed. But then, Suta's voice shifted, carrying a note of divine mystery. Destiny intervened in the most unexpected way. By pure chance, Devaraja came to the city of Pratisthana. There he saw a Shiva temple where saintly people had gathered for religious discourse. While staying nearby, he was struck by a severe fever. During his illness, he happened to hear a Brahmin giving a discourse about Shiva, not because he was seeking spiritual instruction, but simply because he was too sick to move away. For a month, as his fever worsened, these sacred stories were the only sounds reaching his ears. Suta's voice took on an otherworldly quality. After a month of illness, Devaraja died. Immediately, Yama's fearsome attendants bound him with nooses and forcibly dragged him towards Yama's city, the realm of death and judgment. But then something extraordinary happened. Suta's voice rose with excitement as he reached the story's climax. From Shiva's celestial realm, 4 divine attendants descended like lightning. These beings were dressed in white, their bodies covered in sacred ash, wearing garlands of rudraksha beads, carrying tridents that blazed with spiritual power. They attacked Yama's messengers with such ferocity that even these cosmic agents of justice fled in terror. They freed Devaraja from his bonds and placed him in a magnificent celestial chariot as they prepared to depart for Kailasa, Shiva's mountain paradise. The commotion in the death realm was so great that Dharma Raja himself, the god of death and cosmic justice, emerged from his palace to see what was happening. When he saw these 4 beings, who appeared to be manifestations of Rudra himself, even the cosmic judge was struck with awe and fear. He honored them according to proper protocol, but didn't dare question their actions. Through his divine vision, Yama understood exactly what had happened. Out of reverence and perhaps a touch of fear, he didn't dare question these noble attendants of Shiva. After being duly honored by Yama himself, Shiva's messengers proceeded to Kailasa and presented the Brahmin Devaraja to Lord Shiva, that very ocean of mercy, and to the Divine Mother Parvati. And here's the most astounding part. Devaraja, this base Brahmin who was addicted to alcohol, enslaved by a courtesan, murderer of his own parents and wife, killer of countless innocent people driven by greed, became a liberated soul, instantaneously upon reaching that supreme realm. Suta paused, letting the shocking conclusion resonate before delivering his final insight. Truly blessed is the story of the Shiva Purana. The holiest of all holy stories, merely hearing it qualifies even the greatest sinner for salvation. The great seat of Sadashiva is the supreme abode, the noblest of all positions, which Vedic scholars have praised as being situated above all worlds. And this wretched man, this collection of every possible sin, was granted immediate liberation simply because he had heard Shiva's sacred story while dying. Devaraja's story makes an extraordinary claim that engaging with these stories doesn't just offer inspiration or moral guidance, but actively destroys the psychological and spiritual damage caused by harmful actions, while simultaneously fulfilling our deepest human needs for both practical happiness and transcendent meaning. I often wonder what passed through Devaraja's mind in those final weeks. A man who had spent his life chasing highs, immersed in violence, greed, and sensual pleasure, suddenly found himself still, unable to escape. Fever stripped away the distractions that had shielded him from deeper questions. He didn't earn salvation through good deeds. He had none. He didn't achieve it through years of spiritual practice. He performed none. He didn't even consciously choose transformation. He heard these stories accidentally, dying of fever. Yet somehow, the mere exposure to sacred narrative about the divine carried enough transformative power to overcome a lifetime of the worst possible actions. That divine grace can transcend even the most terrible karma through the power of sacred narrative and divine compassion. Personally, I don't think Devaraja's tales suggest we should live destructively hoping for last-minute salvation, but rather that no matter how far consciousness has fallen into destructive patterns, the potential for complete renewal remains intact. Perhaps that no one is beyond redemption, that the Lord's and universe's capacity for forgiveness exceeds our ability to condemn. In our next episode, we'll explore the story of Kankula and how we understand our own potential for change. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell. Until next time, keep questioning, keep practicing, and keep dancing with the mystic.